سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله.
I'm a family doctor. I just moved here from Arizona, which is the complete opposite weather of Toronto, so I'm getting used to your very cold weather. The good thing about family medicine is you can make of it what you like. So I have a lot of interests, and one of my interests is public health, and environmental health falls into that umbrella. So I was invited to talk about that topic. It is a huge topic, so I'm only going to focus on a few things that I think are important and that most people may not actually know about. What we're going to talk about today is define what it is, environmental health. And then I wanted to look at it from the immediate environment, which is your body. So what do you put into your body, what do you put on your body, and why? What are those things? Are they good for you, are they bad for you? And then the external environment. So this is what most people think about when they think about environmental health. They think about global warming and that type of thing. So we'll touch on that a little bit also. What is environmental health? It's a lot of things. So it's human health and quality of life, and it's determined by a lot of different things. It's determined by your physical environment, your chemical environment, your social environment, and your psychological environment, which is your mind. So I just kind of, an easier way to look at that is it's many different things that come together that affect your health. So your health is not just, you know, you're sick or you're not sick. Your health depends on the choices you make. It depends on the environment that you live in. It depends on what you were born with. So genes we can't change. There's a section there on genes. Genes are what your parents passed down to you. So that's something that you don't have control of. But your environment you have control of to a certain extent, and then your choices, as you all know, we have free choice. So our choices we do have some control over. So this is just an easier way to look at how all of these things work together. So let's talk about the immediate environment. So I'm going to focus more on products that people use, the food we eat, and then cleaning products, because these are things that we come into contact with every day. These are all things that we use in our everyday life, but we're probably not as educated on the effects that they may have on our health. So these are just a few numbers that, a lot of these are US numbers, but they do translate because now the world is so huge that we use the same products pretty much. So for women, the average woman uses about 12 products per day. That's about 120 chemicals that a woman is putting on her body every day. For men, it's about half of that, so they use about 6 products a day. And that equals to about 80 chemicals, and these are not, these are just research numbers, so that's why the numbers are different, the proportions are different. Most of these chemicals are not tested, and in Europe, about over 1,000 of these chemicals have been banned, but in countries like the US and Canada, very, very few have been banned. So that's something that a lot of people are not aware of. So when products say not tested on animals, I get really excited because that means that you're not torturing animals to test these products. But then what that also means is that you and me are the guinea pigs. So those products are being used, and they're going to continue to be used until something happens. And then the other thing is that they may test it on cells, like in a petri dish, but that's not as accurate as testing it on ourselves. I wanted to just give you a few, not really products, but they're ingredients that you should look for when you're shopping for your personal products. So the first one are called phthalates, and these are things that are found in plastics. So they're basically a plasticizer, so they're used in detergents, in clothes, in children's toys, in soaps, shampoos, all of those kind of things, nail polish, and even in cleaning products. And they have a lot of effects on hormones. So whenever you mess with hormones, that's never good. One of the things that can result in that is cancer, especially in women, breast cancer, uterine cancer, and in men, sometimes it can result in prostate cancer. So those are a few things that can happen. avoid this, this is basically what I want you to get from this part of the presentation, is that you need to be reading the ingredients on what you're buying. And then plastic is probably one of the most convenient inventions of this century, but it's maybe not the best. So especially for things like food, you should be trying to store your food in glass containers, not in plastic containers. And then I put BPA here as the next one. It's not necessarily used in care products, but it's used in plastics, and that's also not a good agent. It can also affect the hormones and cause cancer. So now you'll see a lot of water bottles, baby bottles, things like that will say BPA free on it. So you definitely want to make sure you're looking at the things you're buying, so the things you're putting your food in and the products that you're buying. Sulfates are another one. These are chemicals used to create strong detergents. And I was a little surprised by this. They actually use sulfates to clean heavy machinery in industries. So, and then they put this in our shampoo. So that's why shampoos work really, really well, because they're using very kind of strong agents that can, could probably, take your skin off if you use a high dose. And they use these things to clean heavy machinery and things like that. So it is claimed to be safe, and I say claimed because a lot of these are not tested. There's not a lot of research. But it's very, very irritating, so it can cause allergies and things like that. Sulfur is probably one of the most common allergies that people have. Parabens are another one, and you've probably seen these on shampoos where they say paraben free or without parabens. These are preservatives, so these are used a lot in makeup. They're used in foods and drugs. They basically preserve the product and they prevent bacteria from growing. But the problem is that they also act as a hormone, and a lot of you know the hormone estrogen. It's the female hormone, but it's also found in men in lower doses. And if there's too much estrogen, if you're using makeup every day, or some other product every day that has these in them for 20 years, you're exposing yourself to small doses but continuously, and that can be bad for your health. And this has actually been found in breast cancer cells. So they looked at breast cancer later on and they found this in it. Okay, so we're going to do I did a little experiment at home. I like to use chapstick, so I looked for two of these chapsticks that I have in my house. And I use both. So I wanted to do this little experiment with you to look at the ingredients. So my regular chapstick, and this is kind of the classic one that everybody uses, actually does not have an ingredient list when I looked at it. And then the other one that I use, and this is actually a local brand, a Muslim sister makes this in her home. It's more of an organic, natural brand. It's called the Olive Tree. This is the other one, and she did list her ingredients. So I'm going to pass these around, so just so you can do the exercise yourself and look at the ingredients. But I have them up here. So because the chapstick didn't have the ingredients on it, I looked it up online, and these are the ingredients in chapstick. I highlighted 3 of them in red. So 2 of them are parabens, which is the thing we just talked about that can cause cancer. And then all of these other big words that I can't say. So that's a little concerning. So there are 19 ingredients in the chapstick. And then if you look at the other one, which is the local brand, and it's actually made here, I think in Scarborough, that one only has 5 ingredients, and you can see that they're all natural, and they're words that you can actually pronounce. So that's another take-home point, and we'll get back to that in a little bit. If you want to look up products, because when I first heard this, I took a course for 6 months on environmental health, and we talked about this a lot, and this really scared me. So if you want to know what the products you're using, if they're safe or not, there's a website called the Environmental Working Group, and they screen a lot of these products. So they actually have a separate website just for cosmetics and personal products that you can type it in, and it'll tell you this is safe, this is not safe, etc. So that's just a resource for you, and that's a photo of their website. So take-home message, and a lot of you are thinking, well, if these are not good for us, why are they put on the shelves, and why are we buying them? Well, the issue is that a lot of the companies that make these products, they lobby. So lobbying is basically they influence the politicians or the decision makers, mostly with money, to not have to put warnings on these things. And because there's not a lot of evidence or research out there, they usually win the case. So a lot of these things are not listed on the ingredients, and you can tell that with the chapstick. There was not even an ingredients list on the label. And so, to be honest, a lot of people don't even look at the ingredients when they will buy a product. Is that right? I did the same thing, so that's why I'm a little more careful now. So the take-home message from this section is just look for things that have the fewest ingredients, and if you can't pronounce it, you probably shouldn't be putting it on your body. That's a kind of a general term. And then look for some of those key words like parabens, sulfates, phosphates, things like that. Those are not, they're irritants, first of all, so if you have kids that have allergies or you have allergies, you don't want to be putting any of that on your skin. And then you don't know how much of it gets absorbed into your body. Onto cleaning products. The average household has about 60 toxic chemicals, and these are all usually in cleaning products. And a lot of people keep their cleaning products under the sink. I do that too. That's probably not the best place to keep it if you have kids, because they can reach those products, and a lot of them are pretty toxic. I actually had a friend when I was in middle school. She came back from her soccer class. She found a water bottle on the table. She thought it was water, and she drank it. And her mom had actually kept bleach in that water bottle. So she was in the hospital for a week because, the bleach pretty much ate up her throat. So first of all, be careful with the cleaning products, especially if there are kids in the house. And then always keep them labeled what it is. So that's just that's a side note. Most cleaning products, they have a lot of chemicals that are harmful, and I only listed a few of the common ones, but there are so many, and I didn't want to bore you with the whole list. I just wanted you to be aware that this exists. So the first one is chlorine, and this is used in toilet bowl cleaners and mold removers. In a lot of things, we actually use chlorine to clean our water, but it's very, very regulated. So the amount of chlorine that the government uses, public health departments use to clean the water is a safe amount, and they regulate it very, very closely. But cleaning products, the companies are not going to regulate that, right? So this is something to look for on the ingredients. And an alternative to using chlorine is actually just regular baking soda. And a lot of people use vinegar to clean. It's a very, very good cleaner, and it's natural and it's safe. So you can dilute it with water and use that to clean the house rather than exposing yourself to chlorine. And chlorine actually is a cancer-causing agent. So if you're exposed to it pretty regularly, then that's not a good thing. The next one is ammonia. And ammonia is used a lot in polishing agents, so keep your glass nice and polished, and your vases and things like that. The alternative, this is not correct, it just got copy-pasted, but the alternative to that is using just like a regular rubbing alcohol. Obviously you want to wear gloves so that you're not absorbing it onto your skin, but that's a safer way to do it. And you can actually use vinegar too. And then there's something called triclosan, which is used in dishwashing detergents and soaps. Alternative to that is using just simple soaps and detergent. So look at the ingredients list. The shorter the better. So if you pick up two different things, they're the same price. Look for the one with the shorter amount of ingredients. Some of the ones that are proven to be safe, there's a lot coming out on the market now. So one of the brands is 7th Generation. You can find that anywhere. I know that Canadian Tire has it, but they'll have a little label that says that this is certified natural or, you know, free of chlorine. And then they'll have oxygen-based chlorine, which is safe. So, so look for that. And then food. So food is a huge one. I only picked a few because there's just so many chemicals in food, it's exhausting. So I picked a few that I thought might be important. So one of them is high fructose corn syrup, and this is found a lot in snacks, certain bread, salad dressing, cereal, and a lot in candy. And this is obviously not good because it's it can cause diabetes, high cholesterol, and obviously heart problems later on in life. So when you start eating these things when you're kids and you keep eating it until you're an adult, you're basically increasing your risk slowly. The next one is aspartame, and actually I should have put this in a different category because it's considered safe in Europe, the US, and Canada. They've done research on it, but I still put it up here just so you're aware of it because it is a little controversial. And it's basically a sweetener, so it's, instead of sugar they put aspartame so that people are not exposed to as much sugar. But it's been linked with cancer and migraines and things like that, so it's just something to be aware of. I'm not going to go through all of these, but I just wanted you to know that food dyes are also one of the things that we don't look at, and the companies are pretty smart. So they start off by actually writing the color of the dye, and then they get caught by whoever, you know, whoever regulates the food. So in the U.S. it's the Food and Drug Administration. You know, there's different departments. So then they change the name, or they just put E133. So when I picked that up and I see E133, I'm like, well, what's that? I don't know, it must be fine. So I buy it. So a lot of things, they'll do that. They'll put a different name. So for dyes, anything that's E and a number after it is a dye. They just don't say that straight out. So that's something to look for. And a lot of these have been banned in Europe because they cause a lot of problems with behavior, they cause cancer, and they actually affect your genes too. So a lot of you probably have heard that problems in children like ADHD, so hyperactive disorder, is becoming more and more common. And a lot of that has actually been linked to food, so the foods that kids eat. So being aware of that is important. And again, I want you to read the food labels. You'll find a lot of these hiding in a lot of your snacks, macaroni and cheese boxes, cereal, soda. So they're very smart. They just change it to kind of a little letter and a few numbers, and people think it's fine and they buy it. I'm not telling you not to buy the products if it says that on it, but it's something to be aware of, and something to look into yourself. And then MSG is a huge one. It's used a lot especially in restaurants. And if people eat too much of it, it can actually cause things like headaches. I use some big words here. You don't have to think about these, but it can cause problems with behavior, problems with the brain, things like that. Tastes good though, and it makes you want to eat more. So that's why a lot of restaurants use it. And then who has heard of GMOs, or genetically modified organisms? Good. So GMOs are another thing that are kind of kept on the hush-hush. They're not really talked about in industries because, again, companies or places that use these organisms make a lot of money off of it, and so they don't want people like you or me, you know, knowing about it. So in Canada, I had to look this up because I don't really know. I know more of the U.S. side of things, but in Canada, there's 4 GMOs that are actually grown here, and one of them is canola. The next one is soybean, corn, and sugar. And what these are, they're basically genetically modified organisms. So what they do is they'll take a seed and they'll change it in the laboratory to make it, you know, more effective, or make it resistant to weeds, or they basically change the natural form of it. And that sounds good on paper, but it actually has a lot of negative effects that can occur. So its safety is not proven, and actually research has started to connect it with a lot of health problems and even damaging the environment because it produces weeds that can't be killed because it's so strong that it produces sort of super bugs or super weeds that destroy other crops. And actually a lot of countries, over 60 countries around the world, have banned it, but the US and Canada still use it and they don't label their food as GMO free. So there are actually apps now on the phone where you can scan a barcode and tell if something is a GMO product or not. Okay, I'm going to try to go a little quicker. So the next one is pesticides, and this is a huge, huge topic. The only thing I want you to look at is pesticides in your grocery foods, so fruits and vegetables. And some of the research that they have done has shown that even after you wash your fruits and vegetables, there's still traces of pesticides. Even if you peel them, there's still traces of pesticides on them. So there's two groups of foods, and this is from that same website, the Environmental Working Group, so you can find this on there. One of the section on the, I guess your left, my right, is the Dirty Dozen, which are these are the foods that have traces of pesticides even after you wash or peel. So apples, celery, cherry, tomatoes, cucumbers, grapes, potatoes, peaches, spinach, strawberries. And then the next group is the Clean 15, and these are foods that do not have the traces of pesticides after you wash them. So these foods are a lot safer. You still want to wash your produce when you buy it, your foods when you buy it, so that's kind of a given, but these ones are not as, you don't need to be worried about. So things like avocados, cabbage, cauliflower, eggplant, grapefruit, papaya, onions, mangoes, corn, sweet potatoes. So those are just for you to know, and this might be something you want to put on your fridge when you go grocery shopping. And think about, for the Dirty Dozen, especially for your kids, you know, they say that the best thing for kids is to give them organic fruits, but they're expensive, and we we need to understand that it's expensive to buy organic. But if you can, at least for some of these on the Dirty Dozen list, try to look for maybe cheaper organic, or just for those types of the ones on that list. Okay, so just really quickly, I wanted to go over the external environment. So how many of you have heard of global warming? Yeah, it's actually a misnomer. So environmental health and environmentalists actually call it climate change. They don't call it global warming because the warming part is just one aspect of it. So I just wanted to touch over this because it gives us the big picture, and I think I didn't really think about this as deeply as I would have if I had not taken a few courses on environmental health. So basically what it is climate change is something that's happening pretty much all over the world. It results from both natural processes and human processes. So there is kind of natural waste that goes on. So for example, plants give off certain gases, volcanoes give off certain gases, and that's taken care of by the cycle in the environment. But the issue, especially over the last 200-300 years or so, is that we're contributing to the environment in a very negative way, especially because of industrialization. So we use coal, we use oil, we use natural gas, and those produce a lot of waste. So that's part of the reason for this. I don't want to go into too much detail, but some of you who are taking if you're in high school or college, you've learned about greenhouse gases. So those are the most common ones are methane, carbon dioxide, and greenhouse gases they're good and bad. So they're good because they prevent the sun from burning us, because they form a layer around the world or around the globe, And that layer will push away some of the sun's rays, and then it'll let some of the sun's rays through. So the sun's rays that come through, we get heat, we get warmth, plants grow from that. But then some of those rays, they deflect off of this, this layer. So that's the good part of it. The bad part of it is because we are tampering with the natural way that things occur, we're producing way more gases than the plants that we have on Earth can take care of. So we're actually making the process worse. How are we doing that? We're cutting down trees. So there's a lot of deforestation in a lot of parts of the world because we cut down trees, put up buildings. So those trees that previously would take that carbon dioxide and turn it into oxygen and get rid of it are not doing that anymore. So that's one thing. And then the second thing is, like I talked about, where we use a lot of coal and oil. Those are the main things we use for energy. And the byproducts of that are carbon dioxide, so it fills the layer around the Earth with these gases. And carbon dioxide actually traps heat. So what we found is that every year the Earth's surface temperature is actually going up by a fraction of a degree, but over the last 200 years it's gone up quite a bit. So that's a little concerning. And then it's also related to air pollution because the climate changing, so that hot air actually makes air pollution worse because it just sits there. It doesn't get rid of the pollution that we're producing, and then it's trapped in. So if you probably noticed, a lot of people in their families, they now have allergies, asthma. You know, kids whose parents never had asthma, now they have asthma or they have allergies, and their parents are like, well, we never had that in our family. What's going on? So this is part of the reason, because all of this pollution is trapped and it has nowhere to go. So it goes into our bodies. All right. So why is this a problem? And I'll try to go through this really quickly. I'm almost done with what I wanted to talk about. But these higher temperatures, they result in climate variability. So it's a little counterintuitive, but in some parts of the world, things are getting hotter, and in some parts of the world, things are getting colder. So that's why it's a change in climate, not necessarily just the warming. One of the things that I found interesting, so a lot of the northern ice caps are melting. I think somewhere around 40% have already melted. So what does that mean? If you think of, I had an ice cap. So let's just say this bottle is an ice cap, and it's sitting there on the surface, and then it melts. So there's all this water in that ice cap. It's going into the ocean. So what happens to the ocean? There's more water. And this is a lot of water that we're talking about. So it actually causes floods in certain parts of the world. So you've probably been noticing there's a lot of floods. Floods are becoming more common. And then water also expands when it's heated, so the sea level rises. So this warming of the Earth, it actually makes our sea level rise. So that's another issue. And then the parts of the world that are getting hotter, the soil is all of the water from the soil is drying out, so it's harder to grow food. So then in parts of the world like Africa, there's a lot more malnutrition because those rising temperatures are actually drying out the soil. And then there are a lot more hurricanes. Hurricanes form when the temperature of water is more than 26 degrees Celsius. So that's where the eye of the hurricane starts. So you've probably been noticing, especially in places like the southeast United States, a lot of hurricanes are occurring there. And then when the ocean is acidified, you get higher carbon dioxide levels, and this actually can kill fish, can kill seafood. So we were in Mauritius recently, and some of the Mauritians in here probably heard about this, but I think there was one day where the temperature went from 36 degrees Celsius to 37 degrees Celsius, just 1 degree, and a bunch of fish died. They just found fish dead on the side of the shore. And that's just 1 degree change in temperature. It can really affect the fish populations. So why is it happening? I talked a little bit about this. It's because of the fossil fuels that we're using, oil and gas. And then it contaminates the environment. We need to be shifting more to clean energy. And these are things like solar, wind, and water. They're expensive to start off with, but in the long run, they actually are cheaper. The problem is kind of a similar situation to the companies that make your shampoo and all of that. The companies that make money off of oil don't want this shift to happen because they're making money off of the oil. So it's a very political and controversial situation, but I think people are becoming more aware of it, and they're standing up and saying, you know, we need to be shifting because we're destroying our planet. And I'm proud to say that Arizona has, I think, one of the first sustainability schools in, I think in the world, I'm not sure, but definitely in the United States. And it's becoming something that people are now having to study because we're so far behind now in kind of protecting our planet that we need people to go into this field. So how can we help? This is an obvious one that you know about: reduce, reuse, recycle. Consider repairing things or recycling things before buying new ones. Donate things if you're not going to use them. Don't just throw them away if they're still good, because someone else might use it. For electronics, you can take your electronics. I know a few places will, for example, printers that are no longer working, rather than throwing them out, you can take them to like Office Max and places like that, and they'll reuse some of the parts. For Mac, you can take your things back that you're not using, and they'll reuse some of those parts. So rather than throwing them out, you can do that. And then this is really important: preserving and planting trees. This reduces air pollution, and it actually counteracts that greenhouse effect that we were talking about. So we really need those trees to get rid of a lot of this waste. And the Prophet ﷺ said that if a Muslim plants a tree or sows a seed and a bird or a person or an animal eats from it, it's regarded as a charitable gift or sadaqah for him. So that's Imam Bukhari. And then also don't waste and avoid producing waste. And I think probably our parents understand this more than we do if we grew up in North America, because we've always had everything, and so we don't think as much about wasting, and especially wasting food. So that's just something to really be aware about. Overeating and overdrinking are forms of waste also, so just think about that. And then try to go green. So going green is things like using public transportation if you can, walking, if you have to go to the grocery store and it's less than a kilometer away, instead of driving, walk. Use a bicycle if you can. That's both for it's hard to do. I know it's hard to do, but it actually decreases the amount of waste that you're producing by using your car. And then you're getting exercise too. So, if you can afford it and you're in the market to buy a car, try to go for the hybrid or electric cars. Those are kind of they're expensive, but they make up for it in the long run, and they're much more cleaner forms of energy. Try to use solar energy as much if you can. Again, it's expensive. That's the problem with a lot of this, is that the alternatives that we have are all expensive, and that's because we need to change that, shift that demand. If we shift the demand, then companies and governments will be forced to give us that cleaner alternative. And then we talked about green cleaning products earlier. And then try to support local markets, because a lot of the local farmers markets and things like that will sell organic foods that are cleaner and don't have pesticides in them. And then that puts a demand for organic food, and hopefully will bring the prices down, because again, those are expensive. So those are just a few things, and then I wanted to quickly go over the carbon footprint. So this is the amount of carbon or waste that you give off or that you produce as a person. And this is important because unfortunately in North America we produce the most, actually China does, we're second. So China produces the most waste, and then United States and I think Canada is number 8. And we're not anywhere near being the biggest populations in the world. So very few countries are producing the most waste, but then the poorer countries are feeling the effects of it because they're the ones that are suffering from the floods and from disasters and things like that that are a byproduct of this whole cycle. So think about what we're leaving behind and how this is going to affect our future. So in a few generations, what's going to happen to our children if we don't keep an eye on this. So just to end, Imam Sheikh Bordaloo is going to talk about more the Islamic aspect, but I wanted to put this in because it made me think about this whole topic. It's an ayah from Surah Yasin. Verily we give life to the dead, and we record that which they send before them, and their traces and all things we have recorded with numbers in a clear book. So some of the other translations, instead of traces, they use the word footprint in other translations of the Quran. And so it's more to think about your footprint in different aspects of your life. So your footprint in the good actions you do, your footprint in this context, the waste that you produce. There's so many ways to think about it. So think about what you're leaving behind and how you can contribute.
Subhanallah, Subhanallah.